everyone, welcome to my very first Patreon exclusive video. This is for you lovely patrons who have contributed the most to my top tier level. Thank you so much for doing that. I genuinely can't believe that people are willing to donate their money so that I can keep doing this. It really, yeah, I'm just very grateful. Thank you so much. And this is for you. This is the video I promised at the end of the Paul McCartney Worst to Best video on YouTube, where I said I would make a video that explains how I actually made that list. So this is it. So this was a pretty long process. This was like pretty much since the start of the year, or really you can trace it back to my Ram video where I talked about it being the first, indie pop album. Once I had made that and I published it on YouTube, there were all these kind of people leaving lovely comments about like their favorite Paul McCartney albums, and it got me really interested in his entire back catalog. And I saw that he had done so much stuff, and I felt stupid that I hadn't really gotten into it like I mentioned in the video. So I was like, all right, it'll be really fun. You can do this in the age of streaming. I'm just going to listen to basically his entire discography, starting all the way back from the McCartney album, or I guess The Family Way, which was 1967, all the way up to now. And I didn't know at the time that I'd make a ranking video. As I was starting to listen to them, I was like, oh, these are all, actually really good, and not all of them are really good, but I had a lot of fun doing it. I was like, this would make a good ranking, but I'm sure there's already like a really good Paul McCartney ranking video on YouTube because it's Paul McCartney. You'd think someone would have, and there are a few, you can see them now on YouTube, but they're often, I don't mean to be too much of an unfair judge here, but they are kind of like poorly edited. They're often done all in one take, kind of like this video is, more or less. And yeah, they just didn't have a lot of good production value. There was a lot of kind of like ums and ahs. They weren't really professional. So I wanted to make not a definitive, but a really well put together ranking of all his music. And as I was going through his discography, I was like, oh, this can also kind of double as like an out of order history of his life. So that's what started happening. But how much did I actually know of his music before I made the video? Well, I knew Band on the Run, I knew McCartney 1, 2, and 3. Also several singles and like just individual tracks off other albums, but not them in their entirety. Like I knew Silly Love Songs, I knew a few songs of Tug of War, I knew a bit of Memory Almost Full, but I really wanted to go through it comprehensively. So now in terms of how I actually listened to the music, how I absorbed it all, I guess, I wanted to judge each album fairly, equally. So I listened to every album in pretty much the same context each time I listened to it for the first time. So for the first time I would listen to an album, I would put on my headphones. They're not here right now, but I got some really nice headphones as a 30th birthday gift to myself at the end of last year. Put them on, went outside for a walk, or sometimes, I'd be shopping for groceries or whatever, but I'd listen to it on a walk. I like to listen to music doing like something active. I've got a friend who will just put on an album and sit on the couch and just, I can't do that. My mind is just, I get too distracted. So I like to do something simple like go on a walk, doing the dishes, cooking, something like that. I don't like listening to music while I'm doing something that requires a lot of attention, so I won't do it while I'm writing, or if I'm, trying to answer emails or something like that. I like to be able to pay attention to lyrics. I like to be able to pay attention to musical nuances. So I find simple activities are the best thing. Anyway, so then after I listen to it once, we try to listen to it again, maybe that night or the next day when I'm cooking a meal. I really like listening to music while I'm cooking. Sorry, there's a lot of construction going on outside. I hope that's not too annoying. After I listened to it once or twice, I would make notes on like my initial thoughts on the album. I would leave about 4 or 5 days to kind of listen to it as much as I can, and I would try to be aware of which songs I kept coming back to, which ones I kept kind of skipping to give myself an idea of how I felt about it. And I would find that as well, albums that I tended to enjoy, I would be like, no, I don't want to move on to the next one just yet. I'm really enjoying this as it is. And then albums that I didn't like as much, I was like, okay, yeah, what's next? I tried to make everything very fair. I didn't want to, because sometimes albums are growers, you do have to let them sit with you. So once I had listened to everything, which took a few months, obviously, because you want to dedicate a good amount of time to each album. Once I listened to them all, I would go back and just kind of cycle them through And so I listened to them all quite a few times, several times in different situations. My initial thoughts on one album might change once I listen to it in a different context. Like I remember I took a road trip up with my girlfriend to the beach one time. We listened to a few albums and I was like, oh yeah, these are actually really good. Because I don't know, it was just a different, more enjoyable context. So I tried to do that with a lot of them as I could, listen to them in different situations. When I had friends come over, I would put something on and just try and figure out where all of them fit in my overall enjoyment. That list shifted, like my worst to best shifted a little bit as as the months wore on, right up to the point where I made where I recorded the footage of the video. And you know what? In a years, however many years, I'll probably do like a Paul McCartney Redux video where I kind of let you all know how that list has changed over time. So yeah, we'll see. I also listened to all of his studio albums first, and then I tackled his like miscellaneous live albums, the Fireman, all that, just so I could really sit with the studio albums for longer, because I felt like it was more important to give them the time they really deserved because they're part of the core list. Whereas I didn't really need to dedicate a week to, the Give My Regards to Broad Street soundtrack. I watched the movie, I listened to the soundtrack a few times, I feel like that was enough. So once I truly listened to all of them, I did what I call the great re-listen, where I kind of listened to the albums like just one after the other in a matter of probably 3 or 4 days. And as I would listen to them for this final time, I would kind of make my final notes about how I felt about each song. By the end of it, I had a paragraph or so about how I felt about the album, and then I had a few sentences on each track about my overall enjoyment, and those served as the basis for the reviews that you see in the video. And so once I had listened to each album, I would usually write like a paragraph or so on how I felt overall about the album, and then I would also dedicate a sentence or two for each song on the album as well. And then once it came time to actually construct the full review, I had pretty much everything written. I just kind of finessed, my overall review. So instead of it being bullet points, it was fleshed out to a proper review like you saw in the video. Then I had to film myself actually, pretty much where I am right now. I'm not filming this on my camera, I'm just filming this on my iPhone. But yeah, I filmed just up here. That process of just sitting here and talking to camera, that took about 5 or 6 days actually to fully get all those takes through. Usually, like every other video I've done, it's taken me just it's a matter of 1 day, a few hours in the day to film them. But this video, I had to record over several days, just because there was so much. And I'm a sucker for punishment. Like I don't just kind of talk off the cuff like I'm pretty much doing now. Like even now I've made a bullet point list of what I'm going to say in this video. But in that video, I wanted it to seem like I was kind of, in a lot of times, like speaking off the cuff. That's kind of my style. But it is all written text that I would usually like memorize a sentence and then I would say it to camera, and that's it. That's my process for like every video. So that process on like 29 pages, 30 pages of text of my reviews, that's how long it was. That took ages. And then what took the same amount of time pretty much was then putting it all into Final Cut Pro, where I edit my videos, editing out all the stuff that I'm not going to use, all the ums, the ahs, the awkward pauses, the flubbing of lines, taking all them out. That took so long. But then I was left with pretty much what you see in the video, me talking about the albums, but then I had to superimpose all the other footage that you see, all that stuff. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, pretty much all that comes from YouTube. YouTube is just a really great resource for this kind of thing, because Paul McCartney is so famous, and the benefit of him being so famous is that there's just an endless amount of stuff on him on YouTube. And I pretty much, would source stuff that no one really owned. It was, a lot of the stuff I took was from like interviews from the 80s that no one really has the rights to. That's the kind of the thing with YouTube these days. There's official stuff that I could use under fair use and stuff, but yeah, it's like the Wild West still to a certain degree with, footage and rights. But anyway, that's conversation for another time. So yeah, I would take as much footage as I thought would add and benefit the video, which itself was a time-consuming task, but a much more fun one, because sometimes you would just need like one line from Paul in a 1 hour interview, and like even if you found that line, you'd be tempted to watch the whole hour, because one, he might offer up some more pearls of wisdom in the video that you'd like to put in, and two, it's just fun to watch Paul McCartney talk for an hour. So I got really distracted, again, why it took so long to make. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what took so long. I mean, the longest period was the listening, and then it was a good month or so of actually editing. Yeah, so thank you. I hope that answers some questions. In the comments for this on this video, please feel free to ask anything else. I'd be very happy to clear anything up. That goes for anything in general. I mean, you guys are the top paying patrons, and so if you want to message me at any point and just shoot up an idea, ask me a question, I'm pretty much always happy to answer. So yeah, thanks for watching this one, and we'll talk soon.